Hello, and welcome to another episode of Real Talk with your host, Sonia. Thank you for joining me today. I hope everybody's doing good today. Got your coffee and able to kind of kick back and relax. I'm recording this on Saturday, so I hope everybody is enjoying the weekend so far. In this episode, I wanted to take a look at how we might identify if we're in a pressure cooker with God. So I'm titling this one, Are You in God's Pressure Cooker? And or you might call it a crucible or the fire, however you might look at it. But we often hear people talk about the fires of affliction, and that, God is a consuming fire. And fire to me also, brings to mind cooking, and so kind of we're being cooked. I know that sounds not literally, obviously, but the idea that God has to, sometimes turn up the heat in our lives and the pressure, and that this is the way that impurities within us can be brought to the surface. And then if God is doing that work, I totally believe it's with the intent to remove those things and bring cleansing. So I just want to say here that if you have been feeling a lot of pressure coming, for instance, from your life circumstances, either internal pressure or outward pressure, maybe both, or pressure from your relationships, maybe in your finances, your health, and health is a biggie. I mean, that creates a kind of pressure we just, we can't really ignore. But it's possible that if you're experiencing these kinds of intense pressures in these areas, that you're experiencing a refining process, or you're going through a refining with the Lord. And it can be easy to feel like, to feel like we're being punished, sadly, during those times. But I just want to encourage you that the Lord's fires of affliction, are not meant to punish. We're not being punished, even though they can often feel punishing, I know, or just the pressures. And that's when they're not, these pressures, and I'm not talking about pressures that God isn't applying, because of course we have many pressures in our lives, and stress, and I don't think that that's doing any good work in us. But when it's God, I believe it's meant to ultimately bless us and prepare us for what He has planned in our future. And so, we tend to want instant results, and I've even mentioned in my testimony on Spreaker, for instance, my Spreaker podcast, that how shocked I was when I was no longer having this experience with God, this mountaintop experience with the Lord, where I was seeing the miraculous, and you could really say a lot of things were happening instantaneously, and they were wonderful, and it was awesome, and wow, but when that started to change, and He communicated to me that I was going to start having to go through a process and processes, as opposed to just seeing Him move in that more instant and miraculous way. Well, I really was, at the time I received this word, I was scared, because I could feel it wasn't going to be an easy time in my life for me. In fact, I began to experience having to go through fires with the Lord. Right at that point, I would call them trials, tests, affliction. I started having physical issues and all kinds of things that I wasn't having to deal with before, at least not in any significant way, and I wasn't getting out of anything. I noticed a complete change in the way my life was working. And I was scared. It was scary to transition into a place like that after having the mountaintop experience with the Lord. But I couldn't even I couldn't get out of anything. And I could no longer go around things either. I couldn't go around the obstacles or things that I perceived as obstacles. I couldn't pray those obstacles away. I had tried. So, but what the Lord was beginning to do instead was teach me to take him by the hand and go through the fire or these trials, whatever you want to call them, with him. In a new way, a deeper way, a more desperate way, but a more tangible way. And I'm still going through that to this very day. I'm still in that kind of a process, but it's not as much. And I've also started, I believe, moving out of that into more activities and doing more things. And so I don't think I'm fully transitioned out. And we're never fully cooked, so to speak, so I'm not sure you ever arrive, obviously, with that. But I do notice that the intensity of it has gone down some, and then I've moved into some new things, and that's been really awesome. But if you are recognizing that you're basically having to go through things, and you've noticed a change where just not getting out of much, and even if you pray, it's not that your prayers aren't being heard, but the Lord is not necessarily removing these things that you're like, wow, Lord, I want that to be removed. Then you may be having to go through the fires with him. In other words, the only way out of something, for instance, is to go right through it. And it can be unpleasant, as I mean, that's been my experience. It can be unwanted. But as I've been learning to hold on to the Lord, hold his hand, and with all my might and strength, and go through that thing with him, through the fire with him, then, he's bringing me through to the other side. So if you're experiencing that kind of a thing, you may be in a crucible, a fire, or a pressure cooker yourself with the Lord. But the really good news here is that he really is with us in that fire. If it's God initiated, he's with us. So I would say a lot of what I've called my transition phase or process with the Lord was preparing me and is preparing me for a new season with him. And it's been involved in this kind of a pressure cooker. So instead of God just instantly delivering me out of situations or sometimes relationships that I think this is too difficult, and but I've really learned a new dependency on him, a deeper new level, and I'm learning to trust him to take me through it instead of always getting me out of it altogether. Now, I'm not saying there aren't still times in my life where he does. I feel he spares, I can see where I've been really spared, and and I'm very thankful for those times, but I'm learning, to go through some things with him, and I'm not even, a lot of times can't even go around them, and where they just touch me peripherally. Sometimes it's just got to go right through it. So I think, though, that God's pressure cookers are intentionally designed and specifically designed for us to bring us to these points of contact with things that we would probably naturally want to avoid in and of ourselves. Things that we'd probably get out of them by any means available to us if we could. And I'm basing that on how I have felt many times. So while that may be a reason why it feels punishing sometimes, and it may not feel like a mercy when we're going through it. In fact, it's been my experience that this can be quite painful. These fires, these trials can be quite painful. And I'm sure if you've gone through them, you're probably going, yep, and can totally relate to that. But if we're able to look at the nature of fire, that it is meant to purify, it's refining elements, are meant to bring things to the surface, then we might be a little less inclined to resist the experiences and the process that these fires put us through. So I've often wondered, well, why did God allow me to experience, such a wonderful season on the mountain with him, of his miraculous power, and often seemingly like instant wow, in my life. But then there I was in the wilderness, and then I began to go through this scary and confusing transition process, but then came out of that wilderness and knew I was transitioning, and began to become aware that I was being prepared and essentially worked on and refined for a whole new season. And so I'm kind of quickly glossing over a lot here. It's actually really my testimony. So if you're interested in hearing more about that, and maybe some more details about my perceptions of the transition process and the beginnings of starting in a new season, a new place with the Lord, a new promised land, I do have those. I have my testimony and some other podcasts on my Spreaker podcast, and you can find me there. I think I mentioned it before, but I'll mention it again. I'm podcaster S Mills. It's capital S, capital MILLS, and my Spreaker podcast is called Real Talk Radio. So, and I do go into more depth about what I've experienced and just some of what I've encountered as I've been in transition and coming out of the wilderness, and some different things there that I, would hopefully bless you if any of this is resonating. And I hope it is. I hope it's encouraging. So, and I did have one more final point on my heart that I wanted to share with you guys today. And I'm hoping it's going to be helpful to you. And it's that one of the purposes of fire is meant to bring up to the surface. It is specifically meant to bring up those things often. I'm sure there's many other purposes, but this is one that I felt was to bring up things that are buried within us. And these things that get really buried, they can go way back. They can have deep roots and have root systems. And some of those things, might have been there since childhood for many of us. So we're talking a long time. So when the Lord starts dealing with those areas through the fire, through the crucible, through that pressure cooker, and suddenly we're having to face things and deal with things, it can be really scary. And so it's just been my experience that the more I've been able to not resist the process and trust the Lord through it, the better it's gone for me. But I also wanted to say that this is, I believe, right at this point is where our will is involved. And I think our will can play a pretty big factor in how we are moving through these processes and fires, as God is getting at the root systems. And I believe he's wanting to pull those roots up so that, he can get to the underlying wound. Otherwise, he can't get at it and we can't get healed. But so if we choose with an act of our will to allow God, by the power of the Holy Spirit, to get at those deep wounds within us, to, we submit as much as we can to the fires and the process, which I don't say it lightly. And so, but we choose, as he's bringing these things up, to not keep those hurts buried and submerged within our subconscious, and allow God to bring them into our conscious mind. And they will come in there, but the problem, I think a potential pitfall, is that we do want to resist sometimes our healing, and we don't want that thing really brought into full consciousness, because we are, it could be something that's a giant to us. It can be something that's very big and scary. And it may not be as big and scary as we're even perceiving it. For instance, if we've been wounded in childhood, I think our perceptions can get skewed and things can seem, but some are very valid. So it's all valid. If it's hurt you and you have fear, it's valid. because what it's done to you is valid, completely. But I think that we do on some level intuitively understand that being healed is probably going to mean big change in our lives, or at least some change, and that it can potentially mean as we change and that we're going to have to grow up in an area and maybe take some more responsibility, or at least step out a little more, shoulder a little bit more, face something that we've kept buried. So it can actually, oddly, be really scary. The prospect of healing can be scary to us. So as the Lord's bringing these things up to our consciousness, I think that there can be a temptation to want to push them back down into the subconscious, because we don't want to essentially grow up in that area. And I think areas in us can get stunted in our development, by the woundings and the hurts and all of a resulting root system that can come up out of that damage. So, but the really good news here is that if we can make that conscious choice to cooperate with the Lord and the Holy Spirit in this process of refinement in God's pressure cooker or fire, his crucible, whatever we decide to call that, but if we do make that choice, that we can receive through that process as we go through it with the Lord, hand in hand with him, a deep and lasting healing and deliverance from something that may have had a grip on us for years and years, from childhood fears, concerns, worries, whatever it is that might be holding us back in an area from being able to grow and develop. And so a healing can hopefully not only happen, but stay with us as we move out and we do expand into these new activities and new territories and new promised lands with God, which I believe has been a big part of my testimony that I've shared with you guys on Spreaker. And I've talked a lot about, what I've gone through and how I feel the Lord wanting me to step out more and do more. And so you might be flexing muscles that are atrophied, or some have never been used before, or you just aren't very developed in that area, but you keep but if you receive that healing and you're saying, yes, I'll go through, Lord, I'll go through what I have to go through to get healed, that then you're ready for that new promised land. So anyway, that's pretty much what I wanted to share with you guys today. And I really hope and pray that this has been a blessing to you and been strengthening and encouraging, hopefully, and especially in your faith and your resolve to keep saying yes to God, even as you are in that pressure cooker with him, especially if you're aware of it, that that this maybe is a little boost to keep saying, yes, Lord, I do want to keep going forward. I do want to keep, facing or dealing with these things as they're being brought to me, and I'm having to face them. And many times it's fears, but anyway, I do pray that it's been a blessing to you today. So this isn't real long, and sometimes I play a little intro song. I didn't do that today. I just kind of plunged right in, but anyway, I think that's pretty much what I had in my heart for you guys today. I really hope you have a wonderful, blessed day. Have a great weekend, and so until next time, God bless you all, and thank you again for tuning in with me. This is Real Talk Radio with your host, Sonia, and I'm signing off for now, and until next time, be blessed.